Alright, so let's get started with today's video tutorial. What you will need are 2 skeins of Woolies Thick and Quick in your color A and 1 skein of Woolies Thick and Quick in color B. You will also need a 15mm crochet hook. An oversized stitch marker is optional, but definitely very handy to make sure that you don't lose the first stitch in each round. And a tape measure so that this way you can check your gauge after we create our first 3 rounds of this pattern to make sure that you will have the right size basket and not run out of yarn. The colors that I will be using today are Butterscotch and Fisherman. So to get started for today's video tutorial, what you will need to do is find the ends of your yarn. Sometimes this super bulky weight yarn can kind of untwist a bit, so if you find that yours is untwisting on the end like mine is on this one skein, you can very easily just twist it back up. Find both of your ends, make sure that you line them up so that we're using the same amount of yarn throughout the whole entire basket because we're working from 2 skeins. I'm going to pull some, little bit of yarn barf, and move these off to the side. Now what we will do using our yarn held double, we are going to create a slip knot. Insert our hook and begin following the instructions for round 1. So for round 1, starting with color A, we need to chain 2, and then we are going to place 6 single crochet into the second chain from the hook. It is important here to make sure that when you create your slip knot, you leave enough of a tail that you're not going to lose your yarn. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab that tail and you're going to pull it tight to tighten up this hole. So we now have 6 single crochet in our second chain from the hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This would be where you would place your oversized stitch marker if you have one. Totally optional if you don't. It just makes it easier so that you know that this is the first stitch in your round and you don't try to pick up anywhere in here. Now, the pattern will say slip stitch to join. You are welcome to slip stitch to join. It's an easy way to do it. There's no issue with that. However, I have been playing around with different methods of trying to create seamless joins or joins that are very well hidden, especially for something like this, where you might have it in a place in your home where you can see part of it. You know, if you have it kind of in a corner where you can put the seam to the back, then it doesn't really matter. But if you're placing this, say, on a table that's in the center of a room with, I don't know, some yarn or potpourri, or if it's fall and you fill it up with crocheted pumpkins, you probably don't want such a noticeable seam. So for this pattern, I am trying out a new method, which I am going to show you now. So what we will do is, instead of a slip stitch to join, I'm going to pull this loop that's on my hook a little bit long. I'm going to remove my stitch marker, and I am going to come into the back loop of my first stitch. I am then going to grab the loop that I dropped, and I'm going to pull that through to the back. Okay? Now I am going to kind of pull a little bit here to adjust that stitch, but I'm going to leave this a little bit long. Instead of moving on to round 2 and creating a chain 1, I'm going to be omitting the chain 1. In the written pattern, it does tell you to do a chain 1 if you slip stitch to join. If you choose not to do a slip stitch to join and you use this method, do not chain 1. What we will then do, making sure that we leave this loop a little bit long because this is going to act as our chain 1, we are going to insert our hook through both loops of that first stitch. Now, this can be a little bit tricky, but it is doable. So get your hook under both loops of that first stitch, yarn over, and create a single crochet. So moving on to round 2, where we would have chained 1 and then we would place 2 single crochet in this first stitch. Instead, we did my little technique. We created our first stitch and now we are going to place our second stitch. So because we are creating a flat circle for the base of our basket, we are going to continue all the way around, placing 2 single crochet in each of these 6 single crochet from round 1 for a total of 12 single crochet stitches. Now I came back in and I placed my stitch marker in that first stitch so that this way I can show you why a stitch marker is important. So this is the first stitch, which may be a little bit hard to see at times depending on your tension. This is not the first stitch, right? So we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 single crochet stitches for round 2. In the written pattern, we would then slip stitch to join and move on to round 3, which would start with a chain 1 and a single crochet in the first stitch. However, I am trying to make this seamless, so I'm going to remove my stitch marker, pull my loop long, come into the back loop of that first stitch, take the loop that I dropped, place it over my hook, pull it through, take my working yarn and adjust the length of my loop, and then I am going to place my first single crochet for round 3 in the first stitch of round 2. Now for round 3, we are going to alternate 1 single crochet followed by 2 single crochet in the next stitch for an increase. So we have our 1 single crochet in the first stitch, and then in our second stitch we are going to place 2 single crochet. Place 1 single crochet in the next stitch, place 2 single crochet in the next. We are going to alternate that all the way around for a total of 18 stitches. Again, make sure to come back in and place your stitch markers so that we don't forget which is our first stitch, and continue alternating 1 single crochet and 2 single crochet. Coming to the end of round 3, I'm going to place my final 2 single crochet in the last stitch of round 2. Sometimes it can be tricky working yarns held double, so just make sure that you always have your 2 yarns on your hook and that you didn't drop one somewhere in here. So we will now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 single crochet stitches for round 3. Now again, the written pattern will say slip stitch to join, chain 1, and then you move into your round 4 instructions. I am creating my seamless join. So again, I'm going to remove my stitch marker, pull my loop long, come in through the back of my back loop, take the loop that I dropped, place it over my hook, pull it through that back loop, use the working yarn to adjust the tension on that loop, leave it a little bit long because it is acting as our chain 1, and then I'm going to insert my hook through both loops of that first stitch of round 3 and place my first single crochet for the start of round 4. Now, before we move on to round 4, this is where we want to check our gauge. So the gauge in the pattern is the first 3 rounds, and it should measure approximately 5 to 5.5 inches. So as you can see, my flat circle is measuring 5 inches pretty much dead on. The first time I worked this, I was about 5 1/4. So as long as you are somewhere within that 5 to 5.5 inch range, then your gauge is good for this pattern. If you did not hit 5 inches like I did just here, or 5 1/4, 5 1/2, 4 3/4, then you're going to need to adjust your hook ever so slightly. While the gauge for this basket isn't crucial, what you don't want to end up with is a floppy basket or running out of yarn. So moving on to round 4, we have to single crochet 2. So we placed our first single crochet, and now we will place our second single crochet, and then we need to place 2 single crochet for an increase in the next stitch. We will then continue that repeat around, placing 2 single crochet, so 1 in each of the next 2 stitches, and then place 2 single crochet in the next stitch for an increase. So single crochet 2, 1, 2, and then 2 single crochet in the next stitch. Round 4 will give you a total of 24 single crochet stitches. All right, I'm coming here to the end of round 4, so I'm going to place my final 2 single crochet in the last stitch of round 3. And then the end of round 4 says to slip stitch to join and chain 1 before starting row 5. However, again, I'm going to do my invisible joining method that I am trying out. So I'm going to pull this loop long, come into the first stitch of round 4, insert my hook from the back, put my loop over, pull through, leave this loop long because it is acting as my chain 1, and then I'm going to place a single crochet in this first stitch. Moving on to round 5, we will be doing 3 single crochet stitches and then 2 single crochet for an increase in the next stitch. We're going to repeat that all the way around until we come back to the beginning for a total of 30 stitches. Each next round will increase by 6 stitches so that this way our base stays nice and flat. I will join you guys after I have completed all the rest of my rounds to show you how we begin to bring the basket up. All right, so I have just completed the last round for the base of our basket. Now on the original basket, we went to round 7 for a total of 42 stitches. On this basket modification, we are going to round 8 for a total of 48 stitches. So the original basket has a slightly smaller base with a diameter of 11 inches, and this basket modification will have a larger diameter base of 12 inches. The reason for that is because the Woolies Thick and Quick has 106 yards per skein, and the Woolies Wow had 66 yards per skein. So even though we're holding it double, this is the yardage that we're going by. So we're holding it double, but we're using 106 versus 66. So I want to take advantage of that so that we're not wasting yarn. So this basket is going to be slightly larger, which is fantastic because it means you could put more yarn in it, right? So now that we've come to the end of round 8, we have a total of 48 stitches. What we need to do now for round 9 is we are going to single crochet in the back loops, and that is going to bring the sides of the basket up. So here's where things get a little bit tricky. Now, what we don't want to do is create a situation where this area here looks funky, right? But we also want to make sure that it's secure. So the best thing for us to do here, I'm going to remove my stitch marker, and just as I have been, I'm going to pull my loop long. I am going to come into the back loop on the first stitch of the same round. I'm going to insert my hook, and I am going to bring my yarn through. The issue here is that if I only single crochet in this back loop and I kind of leave this floppy over like this, it just looks a little funny. This area could potentially become a spot where we lose structure in the basket. So for this first stitch, I am going to single crochet in both stitches, all right? I'm gonna flip my base over just so that it's a little bit easier to work. And then every remaining stitch around, so for the remaining 47 single crochet stitches, we are going to single crochet in the back loops only. So can you see the back loop? This is where we're working. We're only working in the back loops for round 9, and this is what will allow the sides of the basket to turn upward. So I'm coming to the end of round 9. I'm going to place my last single crochet using the back loop only in my final stitch, and then To join, the written pattern says slip stitch to join. If you preferred this method that we were using on the base for this invisible join, that is what I suggest you do. So I'm going to pull my loop a little bit long. I'm going to come into my first stitch from the back, insert my hook, grab the loop that I pulled long, pull this through. I'm gonna take that out. Oh, my yarn's on the wrong side. Okay, pull this a little bit long, and now round 10, what we are going to do is we are going to be placing a single crochet using both loops in the first stitch. We will then single crochet in every stitch around for a total of 48 stitches for round 10. As you can see, the beginning of round 9 right here, you can see how it starts to turn this up because we used that back loop. Goodness, this basket's so big, I have to move my camera out. Okay, so you could see that by working in that back loop, round 9 flipped up. As we get our way through more of these rounds on the side of the basket, it will pull in more neatly and you will really see this basket start to take shape. I am coming here to the end of round 10. I'm going to place my final single crochet in the last stitch, pull my loop long, insert my hook from back to front using the back loop only, grab the loop I pulled long, put it over my hook, pull it through to the back. I'm going to make sure that my yarn is on the right side of my, well, the back side of my hook, but where I need it to be. Pull this loop a little bit long, and for round 11, I am going to repeat round 10. So we will repeat round 10 until we reach row 16. All right, guys, so something funky happened here on my final row. I've got the basket kind of squished down and folded so you can see what I'm doing. So here I am at my final row. I have one and a half more stitches to create, and here is the tail of one of my skeins, and here's the tail of the other. So I have enough yarn to finish, just not between the two skeins. They just worked out funny. So what I'm going to do, if this happens to you, I'm just gonna kind of try to do it without really explaining it because I don't know. It's just, I'm gonna kind of, let's see, I'll bring this end here, right? And I'm gonna drop this tail, and I'm gonna drop this tail, and I'm gonna come into my next stitch, and I'm gonna grab, this is all the one same piece, right? But I've basically folded it in half so that this tail is over here. And I'm going to finish this stitch, okay? And I'm gonna come into my last stitch. All right, so that's giving me this like really long loop because this is all really the same yarn, but it's now eliminating whatever weirdness happened here. So this is my final round using color A. This is round 16. Again, it's just the same repeat of round 10. So what I'm going to do here, because now I have to change colors, when I have this big, thick, bulky yarn, I cannot stand just kind of picking up and working colors in, and it gets to be a bit just too bulky when you change out colors with you know, either thicker yarns or doubling your yarns. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to finish off here completely, and then we will reattach our yarn one stitch over. So to do that, I'm going to pull my yarn all the way through my last stitch, okay? I'm going to come in through the back and pick up in both loops on the first stitch of my last round, which is round 16. I'm going to grab this and I'm going to pull it all the way through, okay? And then I'm going to come into the back loop of my last stitch. All right, I'm going to grab that again and I'm going to bring that through. So it's like I'm essentially closing up this stitch just like this. See? I'll pull that nice and tight, and just to kind of anchor it, I'm going to partially weave it in. So I'll pull it through this stitch and I'll pull it through over here. I probably should have gone the other way because now I've got all these ends in this one spot, but that's fine. So that's how, ooh, that did not hide well. Let's come down one. Let's go down on an angle with the stitch. Yeah, that hides better. not across our single crochet. We'll come down the single crochet. Okay, so now, that one popped back through with it. Let's get that one out of there. All right, so now what that does is that's basically finishing off this round completely. I have these ends that I'll have to weave in, but now what I'll do is I'm going to grab my color B, and I'm going to come in and I'll just move over one stitch so I'm not in where we were joining, which, by the way, look at that. Is that not nice? I mean, you can kind of see it, but that's probably one of the best invisible joins that I've tried so far. Definitely recommend. I'll give it a 9 of 10. I'll give it a 9 of 10. It might just take me a little bit more practice, but I'll give it a 9 of 10 for an invisible join. So before we move on to the next part of the pattern using color B, I am going to show you how I like to divide out my skeins when I'm working my yarns held double, so that this way I have enough yarn to work the whole way through the rest of the pattern so that this is evenly divided. All right, guys, so now I'm going to show you exactly how it is that I'm going to make sure that we have the same amount of yarn from the skein so that we can hold it double and not run out. So I've got my scale here, and these skeins say that they're 6 ounces. I always like to check that. So we need to change my units to ounces. Grams, kilograms, pounds, ounces. It says I have 6.3. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I've got my skein right here. I'm going to find the center of it. Okay, and I'm going to put this on the scale. Let's see. Now it says 6.2. So whatever. I wonder if it's because it's like too big for the scale. It might be. Oh, unless it's, hold on, let's see something. Oh, okay. All right, 6.3. So what I'm going to do is I've got my center here, and I am literally just going to pull out yarn until I have an even 3 ounces. And then I know that I have the same amount of yardage, and I can make myself a nice little ball over here on the side. And I will then be able to work my yarn held double for the top half of this basket and not worry about running out of yarn on one of the balls. So see how it's dropping down. We're at 4.8. All right, guys, I'm going to continue to do this. I'm going to get these this yarn separated out, but that is how I do it. Nothing fancy here, just easy little kitchen scale, and that's it to divide out your yarn. If you're doing this with like yarn that's trying to roll away from you, then you're gonna have to put a bowl or something on your scale, and then make sure you use your 0 feature so that this way you're not weighing the bowl as well. All right, so here we go. We're just about at 3 ounces. So I'm going to finish that up, cut my yarn, and wrap up the balls. All right, so I have the remainder of my skein of fisherman that I was pulling from, and I have what I divided out that is 3 ounces. So these both should be even. They look different, but they should be even. This is a center pull ball that I just wound by hand. I actually have a video for that, so I'm going to put the link up in the top corner for you guys, so that this way, if you ever need to wind a center pull ball by hand, you can learn how to do it using my video tutorial for that. Being able to wind a center pull ball by hand is a great trick to know how to do, because sometimes you might not have the tools with you to wind up your yarn, and you really don't want the ball just rolling away from you all the time. Or even if you do have the tools, I know sometimes if it's just a little bit of yarn, I really don't want to set everything up just for a tiny bit of yarn. So knowing how to wind a center pull ball by hand is a great trick. All right, so coming back to my basket, over here is where we finished off. So I'm going to move over 1 stitch. I'm going to insert my hook. Now I'm going to grab my color B, which in this case is the color fisherman. I'm going to line up the ends of my yarn because we're working double, and I am going to put this over my hook, and I'm going to draw up a loop through that next stitch where the join was. And again, the reason that I'm doing this is to just kind of stagger where all of this yarn is so that it's not super bulky in one spot. So make sure that you pull enough of this through so that you can comfortably weave in your ends later. I'm going to just hold these tails back between my fingers because I don't want to mix them up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to chain one. I'm going to pull this down to kind of secure my yarn in this stitch. This is now going to be row 17 in the pattern. It is again a continuation of the row 10 repeat. So you can change colors however you choose. This is how I like to change mine. So I'm going to have to reattach my yarn, and then I'm going to continue creating my single crochet stitches all the way around for a total of 48 single crochet. When I get to the end of this round, I will be joining the same way that I have been to create the invisible join. However, if you are following along with the written pattern, it does tell you to slip stitch and chain one. It is just a matter of preference. I prefer to have the option of having an invisible join so that this way I don't have to worry about where I put my basket and if that join is going to be visible if it's, you know, say on the middle of a table. Okay, so I'm coming to the end of round 17. So right here is the join that I had. All right, so I'm going to make sure that I skip that, and I'm going to single crochet in my last stitch for a total of 48 single crochet stitches. Now, just as I've been doing, I'm going to pull my loop long, and I'm going to insert my hook from the back into the back loop of that first single crochet, bring my yarn over, grab it, pull it through to the back, got my working yarn to the back, and now I am going to place one single crochet in this first stitch for my next round, which will be round 18, and I am going to continue my single crochet all around. So you will continue repeating round 10 using color B until you reach round 22. So I've made it to the end, guys, with my round 22. I was so close to making it all the way around with the yarn that I had left, but it just didn't happen. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to cut this because I don't need the rest. And then we are going to finish off on round 22. So because we are finishing off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my yarn all the way through. I'm going to come here from back to front through both loops on the last stitch of round 22, grab my yarn, pull this through nice and tight, insert my hook in the back loop of the last stitch that I created, grab my ends, bring those through, and bring those stitches nicely together. See that? Now what I'll do is I'm just going to weave these in a little bit, and then I will grab one of my darning needles and really make sure that this is nice and secure. But guys, this basket is huge. I cannot get it all the way on camera unless I like zoom way out, which I'm not going to do right now. But let's measure up the side. So the base of this basket was 12 inches in diameter, and the walls of the basket are just about 10 inches. So we have a 10-inch deep by 12-inch diameter, super squishy, nice and sturdy basket to fill up with yarn. I really loved working on this basket modification for you guys. I know it's so frustrating when a yarn gets discontinued, especially when it's something like a jumbo weight yarn where there just does not seem to be a lot of that on the market. So I hope that using the Woolies Thick and Quick Doubled was a perfect solution for you guys. If anybody, you know, had a random skein of Woolies Wow and wanted to make the basket but couldn't get their hands on another skein, now you know that you can go just pick up some Woolies Thick and Quick, hold it double, and you can combine it with your Woolies Wow. Either way, no matter which pattern you are following, either for the original chunky single crochet basket or for this modification using a yarn substitute, I really hope that you guys enjoyed this pattern as much as I did. Go ahead, take your baskets, stuff them full of yarn, because now you have more storage, and what's better than a yarn basket full of yarn?